Welcome to the Andrew D'Angelo podcast.
Constant Constance. Each week, Andrew, renowned jazz saxophonist and brain cancer survivor, invites us to look at the many worlds of his guests, with conversations that cover all the arts, human resilience, a little bit of politics, and a lot of humour.
You can't fail to have a fantastic time.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. We are here today with Mr. Jeremiah Fox, who is an exquisite entrepreneur and owns several businesses in our neighborhood here in Brooklyn, New York, called Windsor Terrace. And I dare say he's very successful, but either way, he is an incredibly kind and positive and supportive person. He has really changed the dynamic of this neighborhood, and I'm very excited to have him on the show today. Jeremiah Fox, welcome, sir.
Woo! Thank you. Super. It's my Ric Flair. Woo! That's my thing. That's my thing.
Mine is
excited to be here.
Mine is the illuminate thing. So I'm practicing. Yeah, exactly. And just so everybody knows, Jeremiah is, dare I say, are you a master Jiujitsu or?
No, not yet. Master in the making.
Master in the making, Jiujitsu martial artist. And
yeah.
I, for a period after my whole, everybody knows about brain cancer now, I was suggested that I go into martial arts because it wasn't, jogging, it wasn't, high intensity. And although I couldn't walk for weeks when I first started, because man,
I bet.
So anyway, unusual uniform, but I pulled it out of my drawer for Jeremiah. And Jeremiah, I can we just jump right into it since you have a little bit of time?
Go.
I was discussing with our dear friend and inspirational also and very talented chef Maya Lederer yesterday that I was having you on the show, and we were just going back and forth. She's working front of house now at a restaurant all through Corona, through
right. Yeah.
COVID, and we talked about that. And anyway, so there's a two-tiered question that we both kind of came up with that I would like to ask you. So the first part of the question is, what got you into the restaurant world, and how did you end up opening these places in Windsor Terrace? The second half is...
it was only one half. Okay.
Yes. And honestly, we're both curious how Prospect Ave went from being absolutely nothing but junkies, et cetera, to being a community hang. What was that process like? And actually, I didn't know there were junkies on Prospect Ave.
Yeah, big time. And there's still a couple, but yeah.
Okay.
Great question. So I got into the restaurant industry young, like 14 years old. Two main reasons. One, sorry, Mom. My mom was a horrible cook. So
was mine, by the way. But it didn't make me want to open a restaurant.
Right. So my parents split up when I was young, and I mainly lived with my mom throughout my childhood. And she was a hard-working, hustling lady too. Worked two jobs most of the time. There were three of us. I was the oldest. And she was just a bad cook. And I would watch people like on, this is like the 80s. I'd watch people on TV enjoying food. And I'm like, food doesn't make me feel that way. Like, what are they eating?
Right.
What is it? And her aunt, who was like Depression era kid, lady dropped out of like third grade to be a seamstress in the Depression to make money for her family. She would come in and like take care of us from time to time. And she taught me how to cook when I was like 11 years old, like on a flame, like legit. And she was like, boy, if you're going to make it in this life, you need to learn how to cook. And, taught me basics, just like how to flip eggs and make grilled cheese and just like, kind of household classics. And then I was like, oh, wow. Like, that's why people, like, if you make it well, it's very pleasurable, it's exciting, and then, and I also really wanted to just like run away and get out of my house and be my own person, like really young, and financial freedom was the key for me. And so when I was 14, there were guys like doing paper routes and stuff. And I was like, nah, man.
Not for me, right? Not for you.
Restaurants.
Right.
Like I was always passionate. Like my whole vibe was always just to create, like creation and a number of ways, studying music and food and opening businesses. Like, it's a creative process. So I just wanted to get in there and do that. And I wanted to learn. And then there was also the allure of, I got into drugs really young too. So there was that. Yeah. You're looking at these guys.
They kind of go hand in hand, right?
Man,
like entrepreneur, like drugs, you want to change your life.
Restaurants,
right?
Music, all of it. So it was like, I knew older guys from school that worked in restaurants, and they all always had drugs and girls and like access to booze. And so I was like, man, this is what I want to do. And we did. We got in, and like 14, a bunch of us were just like taking out the garbage, washing dishes, getting high, chasing tail, getting free beers after work. And it was the best thing. And learning a skill at the same time, learning how to cook. I was not academic. I dropped out of 2 high schools. I was just like, I'm out of here, guys. Somehow I ended up with a master's degree in music. It was a very meandering stream.
Oh, I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah,
where'd you get the master's from?
University of Buffalo.
Okay.
Yeah, master's of music and percussion performance.
Wow.
And didn't want to do the education route. My mom's she's now a elementary school music teacher, and I was like, I want no part of that. But she was like, the people were like, you got to do something, man. You're talented. Like, I was also running bands in high school. Like, I was running a working reggae band when I was like 17 years old.
Wow.
And a restaurant at the same time. So the idea of just like hustle and just constantly grinding was always there, not being tied down by like school and things like that. And, I was getting out of either the restaurant or the club at like 2:00 in the morning. And, you're supposed to be at school by like 8. And like literally school for me was just a nap. I would come in, I'd find a desk, I'd fall asleep, I'd get up. Like, they kept pushing me through too. They kept passing me. And I was like, I was smart. Like, I knew the material. I just didn't do shit. I came in and I would just sleep. And so both like music too, that allure of just like, party, the musicians always had the girls and popularity. And I just was attracted to like the lights, it was just like follow the lights. So restaurants and music both kind of service that for me. And throughout my life, it's always been like a battle back and forth where like, I'm gonna go hard on music. I'm just gonna be a musician, and I'm not gonna have a boss, and I'm just gonna do that and nothing else, to like, oh my God, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going back to restaurants. And then like, oh my God, I hate restaurants. I'm going back to music. And it's been this like pendulum back and forth between those two for like freaking 30 plus years now, So go ahead. What were we gonna ask?
Well, I find that, well, first of all, I don't know if you know this about me, but I was a cook. I was a short order cook when I was 16.
Yeah.
And I like basically cooked for an entire cafe. I brought this up on another episode, but and I also awesome. It's interesting you say you were running bands, because we always called the person a leader. Like, I led my own big band that did dances and weddings and all that stuff, from age 15, 16, 17, those years. So
yeah. No, I said ran because I was doing like the business side of it. Like, I was the drummer,
right?
But like, I wasn't writing the music or anything like that. I was booking the gigs. I mean, 16, calling clubs, booking gigs, cash management.
So you were like a manager, like, or something like this, right?
Yeah,
or an agent or something.
But also the drummer as well. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. For me, the business side was, get the check from the, person who hired us, and then, back in the 80s, write checks for the 15 people in the big band. So that was that's my, as far into the business as I went. It's interesting that, about the Prospect Ave in our neighborhood and the, crackheads or whatever they were. And then you talking about being into
heroin.
drugs.
This is a heroin neighborhood.
Yeah. And, there's that guy who's running around stealing garbage cans so he can buy heroin. Do you know this dude? Right.
No, I didn't know about him.
Quick anecdote if you're up for it. There's been we've had 3 garbage cans stolen, the ones outside. And so I'm talking to Marty Markowitz, who lives across the street, and they have security cameras. And anyway, I caught the guy red-handed, and he threatened to kill me. And I've already talked about this in the podcast, but he was threatening me, and like, that he would come back and get me. And I was trying to film him, and he's like, I'll break your fucking phone if you don't put it away. And I'm like, okay.
Nice.
So anyway, I'm talking to Sergeant McGrath at the NYPD, and the guy steals. You do? Okay.
Steals I know Danny well.
I should have Danny on the show. That would
that would be a trip, bro. I would love that, actually.
No, I mean, it's like he'll actually call me. Like, I think he does a later shift because he'll call me at like 8, and then we'll just like rap.
No, he's great. He stops by the restaurant regularly. He just pops in and he's like, he'll see me on the street and just like the whip will roll up and I'm like, oh, and it's like Danny. And I'm like, oh, she scared me, man. I'm like, I got no warrants, do I? Like, Jesus, rolling up on me like that.
So dude steals cans, not Danny, but this guy, and goes and to Walmart or what's it called? Windsor Market, Key Food.
Yeah, Windsor Farms.
And just fills it up with the beer or a bunch of stuff. And then goes around to bodegas and sells it for cheap. And then takes the money and buys heroin. Anyway, cycle. Yeah. But it's interesting that you were, I don't know how you got into that focus, but that you were using or whatever is so important in your life. And then you took a neighborhood I mean, dude, I grew up, when I lived here 20 years ago, there were no ATMs. You could not even find an ATM. I remember somebody tried to open an organic grocery store on what my elders here in their 90s called 9th Avenue, which is really Prospect Park West.
Prospect Park West, yeah.
And he couldn't sell the food. People were like, organic? Nah, well, we just eat food, from the Key Food. We don't need this organic. And so
that Key Food was special too, wasn't it? That old Key Food, like doo up on the radio when you walk in. Like, oh my God, like a time warp.
So you really, it totally time warp, but you like to focus on your contribution. Really have, I mean, I can actually get a really nice meal or a really nice bottle of wine, or and another funny thing is when I came in the other day or the other week, and you were saying, I was asking you how's business at the juice box, and you were like, it's really good. And I'm not really sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Right?
A little alarming, yeah. People be drinking. Well, there's a number of reasons for that. One is that people are stuck at home, and we noticed, you couldn't go to bars anymore. And so people started to buy a lot more spirits because they wanted that like same experience, and people making drinks at home, that participation in that went way up. But also a lot of stores either shut down even temporarily or are still only curbside, and we kept our doors open the whole time. So we picked up customers from other neighborhoods or other stores that wanted that full experience still, but they couldn't get it. I mean, I hear there's still places on 7th Avenue that you can't go in. It's curbside only. And we're like 10 months in, and like we all have the protocols. We know how to be safe. And they're just like, no, we're not doing it. So people will come from Park Slope or Ditmas Park or other neighborhoods where you can't go in. So some of them are new customers, but it was like, for a minute, I was like, man, I hope everybody makes it out of this.
Like walking and shaking, like, grabbing shit off the shelf. But you also have that Russian lady at your place that's like, no, you must leave. And you come back in anyway. Yeah,
so great.
You're being a little more humble than I expected. So I'm just going to like kind of push a little harder. So when I'm talking to Maya Lederer, who I believe she's 26, right? 25?
I'm not sure.
And I've known her since she was in the movie.
It's a baby, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And when she says that you really improved her neighborhood, I mean, they live 2 blocks from your, a couple of your businesses. Jeremiah, what did you do? What was your vision for what you were doing?
Oh,
and
man,
never mind the backstory. Just like,
there was no vision. It was literally just like throwing Hail Marys left and right. Like, this seems like a good idea. That seems like a good idea. Let's try it out. And I'll say this, a lot of people ask me this question, and I'm like, we weren't like, masterminds or anything. It was literally responding to the people around us. So people say I built the community, and I'm like, no, the community built me. Like, I was literally just like, I was just fucking off, man. I was just having fun. We had one little kid, we moved to Windsor Terrace like 16 years ago, and we just fell in love with it. And Prospect Ave was empty. There was nothing. I was always mad because I could, like you said, couldn't get cash out of an ATM. You couldn't get a cup of coffee, just like, it was just like, fuck, man. Like, I always had to go to like Park Slope or Carroll Gardens or something like that. And and enough people had said, we need something here. We need something. And so, the wine store opened up, and that was good, but it was very meager at first. Like, at first we didn't even have spirits, it was just wine. It was hard as hell to get a lease. it's hard as hell to get the license, and like finally got this together. And so the wine store really became our demographic study, where we were, that was like all the ambition we had kind of. And we all were veterans of like the Manhattan restaurant and bar scene. We'd all done that, for collectively like 30 years. But we were done with that. Like we had little kids. We wanted like the quieter lifestyle. We didn't want the super late nights. So the retail thing really helped a lot. And plus this was on the tails of the 2008 recession, where restaurants took a hard hit then too. People stopped spending as much money out. People started to really question the price of things, especially wine. I remember waiting tables in 2007 in the city, and people started to ask me all the time, like, well, why is this wine so much here when I can get it down the street at the store for like $8? And I'm like, yo, like, I'm just a server, man. I don't know. You want a glass of wine or not? Like, what the fuck is going on, man? Right. People started to look into that. So it was a good time to go into retail. And then obviously we the economy kind of bounced back from that. And people around here really were like, they understood, because we had done things through the schools and stuff that let people know that, we have a background in food and beverage and in service. And people were like, oh, you guys are good at this. Oh, you guys should, what we really like, and that pressure just kept coming and coming. And slowly, as the economy kind of bounced back too, landlords were opening up the spaces. So a big part of it was like commercial real estate and commercial landlords, which are, sorry if there's any commercial landlords listening, you guys are like aliens. There's like aliens, commercial landlords, and then we start to get down to like humans. Like they do weird stuff, man. The behaviors are like, I feel like we're on National Geographic observing some like creature in the wild when dealing with them, So a lot of these spaces, they were just closed. I know you remember like just the roll down gates covered in graffiti. They never came up. You never saw anybody going in and out of them, garbage piled up in front of them. They were just sitting on them, and I understand there's like some sort of tax abatement they get for having a vacant space. Now it's nowhere near the amount they could get for rent, but it's something which I would like to see that taken away, because it incentivizes them to like take a chance, take a lease, improve the neighborhood. But the commercial landlords really are like the gatekeepers when it comes to that. So a lot of these places were just like sitting here empty and nobody was offering the leases up. But on the the wake of that bounce back from the 2008 recession, they started to say like, oh, okay, there's some action here. There's something to this. So those spaces started to come up. And I mean, I guarantee you, I looked at like 20 commercial spots
all in the same neighborhood, or
going up even up to like the corner of Windsor and 7th Avenue down into Ditmas Park, just looking at every little spot that we could find, going up and being thrown out of places, like knocking on the door like, hey, is this place available? Get the fuck out of here. Who are you? Crazy stuff. Just prodding around. So, but they started to come up, and like the space that Della's in, where I'm sitting right now, it was closed for 5 years. It was a real estate and insurance office. The guy had a falling out with the landlord, left. I mean, he ripped everything out, the toilet, everything. There were holes in the floor.
The landlord or the tenant?
No, the tenant. And the landlord just shut the gates, thinking like there's no value to this place. And I mean, you talk to old guys in the neighborhood who, I know these guys that like bought a bunch of properties back in like the late 70s and early 80s. And they would turn places down back then that were only like some of these 12-foot row homes for like, they would cost them like $5,000, and they'd turn them down, and they'd say, man, I didn't know the neighborhood was shit back then. Like that was everybody's that was the party line was like, this neighborhood is crap. Even if Park Slope is escalating, nobody knows about Windsor Terrace. Nobody comes here.
And that's how we liked it. That's a little bit, I mean, my neighbor, who is now just turned 96. Bought this building, which is, I think it's an 80-foot. I've been through this before. I think it's an 80-foot, and it has a garage and a driveway, and therefore we have windows all the way down the side. I think I have 22 windows.
Wow, that's amazing.
And she bought it for $19,000 in 1955. It is now worth $1.83 million.
Oh, probably.
And
more.
for her, well, whatever. I'm talking from Zillow. All right. So whatever, let's ballpark it. But, for her to think of that kind of money for a place that her mortgage, I think, was $50 a month or something like this. And I'm not exaggerating. People can do that.
I know you're not. It's like, I'm laughing, but I'm really crying.
and she's like, Andrew, you want to buy the place? $1 million. I'll give you a discount. And then she just starts cracking up. And it's it hurts, but it's also, it is what it is. I mean,
Yeah,
you know, what can you do? I mean, she, speaking of my neighbor, she also came up in the Great Depression. She was born 1923, and World War II, Vietnam War, 9/11, blah, 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 Nixon, JFK, blah, blah, blah. And I asked her, how does this situation compare? I'm talking about COVID and the presidential thing. And, you know, by the way, how was your week? It's January 10th, 2021. How was your week, everybody? That at this moment.
Yeah, great. Fucking great.
And she said, this is absolutely the scariest time she's ever had in her life. And I just was fascinated by that. That somebody,
I think a lot of that though has to do with just like the constant hammering of information too, because back then it was scary still, but it took forever for like news reports to get through, and you only got to see so much. Like World War II, like it wasn't on your it wasn't in your backyard, you know, it was across the ocean, it was in another country, it might as well have been in another world, and the information was slow to roll in, and the, you know, people I mean, you can doctor up a TikTok video real quick of something that just happened and put the right music to it, and all of a sudden you're like a small scale, you know, movie producer, and you got people's emotions tied into it, and you know, it just hits a different way than it did back then. I mean, it's hard to say. You know, are you familiar with he's a really famous martial artist and coach, Firas Zahabi? Have you heard that name before?
Yeah, only familiar. I don't dare. I figured if I wore my ghee, that you would go into some
kind of shit you're gonna bring.
Yeah, you were gonna go to some deep like shit about this. So I won't pretend that I know much more than.
So his one of his main claims to fame is he's one of the cornermen and main trainers for George St. Pierre, who's, you know, multi-time UFC champion, and he's probably the top fighter out of Canada. So Firas has probably the best gym in all of Canada. He's in Montreal. It's called TriStar Gym, but he's a philosophy minor, or he has a philosophy major from college, and just really well spoken. And he's been on like Joe Rogan and a couple times, and like London Real with Brian Rose, but he was on like a business or some like a tech show recently. And the host was like looking at his audience. He was like, I know it's kind of weird that I got a pro fighter and coach here, but just hear him out. And he was talking about adversity and like tough times, like, and talking about the pandemic. And this guy's reading like the memoirs of war generals going back to like the Roman Empire. And he was like, those guys had it tough. Like those guys woke up every day to just Armageddon, you know, it was terrible. And like everything around them was just bad. But they persevered and they saved an empire, you know? So I feel like, you know, take it into context, like, yeah, it's tough. Things kind of suck. People are crazy. Like we're getting to know humanity better. Like we're messed up, you know, we're not all together. We dress up nice, but like, we're not all together. So we're getting to see that. And I think it shakes people's ideals. Like people have ideologies and they're like, that's great. This is who I am. And then like something real happens and you get to see it and you're like, oh, maybe that's not who I am or who we are, you know? Back then they had no choice. They just had to wrestle with it. And it was bad. I mean, like Roman generals. Whew.
This week's podcast is sponsored by The Juice Box. From here to Merlot, you've really got to grab a bottle of wine from The Juice Box. A beautiful selection handpicked by the great Jeremiah Fox. You know it rocks.
Hey everybody, we are back with Jeremiah Fox, and he is the star of that commercial that you've been hearing on my show, Jeremiah Fox, so you know it rocks. Do you remember that line?
That's the best. I love it.
You know what's funny, huh?
I'm coming up with some branding off of that somehow. I'll cut you guys in, but like, oh my God, I love it. I don't know why I never thought of that.
So I actually am curious to hear what direction you would like to go in. I have something sort of off script that I want to ask you, or I can just stick to the questions that I have in front of me. It's up to you.
Man, I'm game for anything. I mean, I just wanted to finish my thought again, or reiterate about, you know, like how things came about on Prospect Ave. And again, it was really born out of you know how they say it takes a village to raise a child. That's how this stuff started. You know, it was like a lot of people were involved, and it was feedback from people. Like me personally, you know, I would never just go into a neighborhood and be like, there's a commercial spot, I'm going to open a restaurant, it's going to be successful. Like, odds are against you. Even pre-COVID, it's like a bad gig, So it never would have happened if it wasn't for like everybody, like really people giving us air in our wings and saying like, if you make like literally the opposite of Field of Dreams, they were like, if you build it, we'll come, And that's really how it happened. And the other beautiful part about Prospect Ave is almost all the business owners live here. It's all like local, like
Right.
very few, most of the business owners here, like walk to work. They don't drive. They don't have to take the train. They live right here. And that's kind of special too. And it was great to just be a part of it, and all of that fed into more momentum. And now we have what we have. And it's funny because people move here now and they're like, oh, this is so cute. Oh my God, this neighborhood, and then there, people will say like, what this neighborhood needs is like a craft beer store. And I'm like, don't, you guys had your chance.
Right.
We did that.
Tried that, did that. Right.
Yeah. You guys don't drink as cool as you think you do.
I when I go and I buy that Peak Organic, which I think is craft beer, but anyway, it's good beer. And I always get grief. At Muhammad's bodega, they're, these older, maybe a retired cop or, fire department worker, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, is that beer any good? They're buying some bud or whatever. I'm like,
right.
Yeah, it's good. And I'm old enough that I'm not, gentrifying your neighborhood here. I just happen to like this. And I actually knew the original owners of Peak Organic in Maine.
Cool.
Yeah,
cool.
They used to come to my shows when I played in Maine, and they give me, a 6-pack for the ride home. Okay, don't tell anybody that we would drink on the way home. But it's one of those things. It's a perfect transition. So and this is the part that's a little off script, but I really want to ask you this. My family is considering buying a business in probably Chicago, where my nephew is, and maybe a warehouse space, because it seemed like a good time to start something like he's sort of a gallery space and obviously music. And then my nephew's like Maya. I mean, he's basically a budding chef and makes unbelievable food. And not so much advice for me and my family, but it seems like you're kind of telling people, it just kind of, go for it. If you have a passion for it, and just go for it. Don't worry about the long-term, right? I mean, I'll let you take over.
There are different, you need to worry about the long term, but not in terms of like your business plan. Because look at how many people were starting a business in January and they had all the numbers and they'd done all the research, and then boom, pandemic comes and like just throws all that out the window. I think in terms of your long-term goals, just be committed to it. Like a guy came to me recently who wanted to get into the restaurant industry. And I think it's a great time now to get into business because everything has been shaken up so much. Like you can negotiate the craziest terms on your lease, like things never before heard of, because they're just like, I don't know what's going to happen. So in a way, it's a great time to get in. If you've got the bread and the opportunities there, go for it. So this guy was like, I want to get into the restaurant industry. He'd been running restaurants for other people for a long time. And he's like, I think I want to buy one now. I'm like, it's a great time to get in. And then we talked a little further and he was like, I definitely want to sell it at some point. And I'm like, great. If you want to sell it, pretend like you're going to pass it to your children. So that's like the long-term thought process. Pretend like it's a part of your family, and you'll have the longevity and you'll have that valuable asset to either sell or pass on to your kids. If you're chasing numbers on paper, you're going to make decisions that are going to be detrimental to the business somehow. You're not going to put the business, its personality, its persona, and its livelihood as paramount. You're going to chase the paper, as they say. And that's not always great for business. If you're a startup person, I don't know, that's not my field. I deal mainly in brick and mortar, and service to that, to some extent, whether it's retail or full service. But I think it's a great time, and you just never know. You just got to go for it. Like you just always have to go for it.
It's beautiful. And I had the owners of Bar Lunatico on, which is in Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn, and Richard Julian and Arthur Kell. And just by some odd chance, a fan of mine has a student who's 11. His name is Oliver. He has the youngest Beatles cover band in the world. So that's kind of cool.
That's awesome.
But he wants to open a venue, right? This kid wants to open a venue when he grows up. And so he gets on the podcast with, his chaperone and his teacher and the security guard. It was hilarious. Richard and Arthur, started talking about the backside. You have to pay, they've been having to pay their liquor license and their unemployment insurance and, all of this stuff.
Oh yeah.
And poor Oliver, whose voice hasn't changed, is like, oh, okay. Right. I haven't watched the episode, but it was just like, talking about crushing your dreams,
Poor kid.
and maybe it's not as bad as maybe I'm exaggerating for, humor, but it was just like Richard and Arthur Kell were just like, yeah, I mean, right. But we have to get off this call and do all the paperwork for this month for a business that hasn't been open in 8 months. I think at that time it was about 8 months. Just, I think we don't always put ourselves in that position. Like we think about going to a restaurant, how much fun that is, or we don't have to do the dishes or pay the person cooking the food or buy the food or supply the store. Like we go to your wine shop and we're like, yeah, wine. But what about all the people who grow the grapes and then make the wine and ship it? And then you're doing your end. And yeah, those bottles of wine, by the way, folks, should be like $200 because the energy.
It should be more.
It should be a lot more. And so I guess you inspiring people, just go for it, which is what I keep telling my nephew, but he's got to have a business plan.
You need to know a little bit, but even even people that know a lot, they get rocked, man, constantly. I think there's a really great quote. I say this on my show often. I believe it was Simon Sinek that I heard say this, but I might be mistaken. But one of those, super famous business personalities, and he said most business fatalities are the result of suicide, not homicide, meaning that it wasn't like market forces. It wasn't like undercapitalization. It was your perseverance, your aptitude for adversity. And like, I learned that hard. I mean, I've been saying that quote for like 2 years, and like the last 8 months proved it to me, where it definitely was about your internal dialogue and talking yourself off the bridge. Cause like, it would have been so easy to just be like, fuck it, man, I'm done with this.
I'm out.
I'm out.
Right?
I am out. Like, I do not need this. But for me, I became very selfless in this experience because I have literally like families that rely on me now, like I've got employees who like, the person that works for me is the only person working in the family, and there's children involved, and there was nowhere else to get a job. Some of them, they're cash only, like it was like, if I didn't provide for them, they were going to be in a really bad situation. So I was like, okay, man, like I'm with you. I got you. Like, I don't want to be stuck at home anyway. So it also gave me a reason to get out of the house. I was like, cool, because my house is crazy sometimes.
Right.
And which, my kids question, which is great. Like, why can you not remember our names? Like, because I'm busy. I got so much going on. I mean, I go back and forth between the wine store and the restaurant so much that I answer the phone in one place as if I'm at the other. So I'll be in juice box and I'll be like, Della. And people are like, oh, I thought I called the juice box. I'm like, you did.
You're right. Oh, sorry. Juice box.
Let me change character real quick. And the same here. Like, that's how it is. But
well, it kind of relates, if you don't mind me interrupting.
No, go for it.
You had somebody on your show. By the way, Jeremiah has his own very successful podcast, and we'll put a link so people can find that.
Awesome.
And this was about a week or two ago, and the person you were interviewing, I apologize, I don't remember his name, but maybe this will trigger for you. He said it's all about interaction. It's not about the transaction. So he said so many people focus on the transaction, like, old school at the register. You want to get that person up there and ring them up. But it's all about interacting with them beforehand. And then now with social media and internet, you have so many opportunities to say thank you and like, hey man, I remember you from the shop or whatever it is you're doing. Do you remember this?
So that's actually my brother. That's a little, that's a sideshow he and I do just on Instagram Live called the Zorro Brothers Oddcast. So
right.
Our last name is Fox.
Right.
He just married a Mexican gal. So he's trying to get He's Mexicano up, and so he came up with that clever little name, the Zorro Brothers Podcast. And it's about, he's in business too. He's done some, some side projects of his own. He works for a bigger company right now, but we both have that same like hustler DNA that we totally get from our mother's father. He was like the epitome of a hustler in the deep South, and we were around him as kids and got to feed off of him, and we both act a lot like him. So it's just like that energy kind of magnified when we do this show. He was actually a guest on my show maybe like 8 months ago or something. I can't remember. And I don't know, it's just like, we should do this every week. We should just do a thing. And so we did. And he's also a martial artist. On the show, he often comes on in a gi.
I think he was in a gi on that episode.
He was in a gi. He was, And
he's much bigger than you. So
which is funny. He's 8 years younger than me, but like,
right.
He definitely did a little of the bomba, the stuff from Brazil, to make him a little bit bigger. And he was a competitor. He fought a couple amateur MMA fights. He's a purple belt as well in jiu-jitsu. He hasn't trained in a while because he's moved a lot, but he just did it for. He was a competitive wrestler in middle school, so he's been a fighter. He was a cop. Like, he's done a bunch of stuff. So he will kick my ass still. But I'm working on. But I got years on him. Like, I tortured him up until he was like maybe like 15 or 16. Like, I totally dominated. And so like we're neck and neck, and we'll see who's gonna come out on top. But yeah, that was a great thing he said, and it's that just like backs up what I was saying about the gentleman wanting to like buy a restaurant to sell it. Like you that's fine, like totally do that, but you have to trick yourself so that you build the most value, the most resellable value, and in the meantime, you're also going to make yourself the maximum amount of money if you're treating your business that way. If you're making it now, if you want to buy like a McDonald's franchise, sure, that's different. Go be sterile, go be like a robot. But we're talking about something a little bit more intimate and down to earth and people oriented. And if that's the case, you go hard on the people, on the interaction, not the transaction. Treat everything as if it's a family member, and your chances of success. And not giving up, just same way you wouldn't, like, if your cousin called you and they were just in like a terrible, terrible way. If you cared about them, you wouldn't be like, hey man, I got to get off the phone. I can't talk right now. You would make the time. You would tell everybody else in your world, like, sorry, this is a family thing. I got to deal with this. If you treat your business the same way, your chance of success is high.
So it's interesting because my cousin called before the elections to make sure I was
You were
voting.
like, fuck off, man.
No. She called me to make sure I was voting for Trump. And if I wasn't, why wasn't I? And this was maybe 2 weeks before the 2020 elections.
It's awesome.
And when I was posting about it on social media, people were like, I'm sure you gave her an earful. And I was like, I actually didn't. I just kind of changed the subject, and we talked about, what's going on in her life and my life, because I really, if you're that person, politics aside, then go ahead and be that person. I love you, but like you said, I mean, it's just funny you brought up that example because it was kind of in the back of my mind.
It's very true. It's very true. And for me, like, I'm, as a business owner, like, I have to really play the, would you say the illumination? That was your thing, illumination?
Illuminate, yes.
Illuminate. Yeah, I mean, I have to be like invisible almost in terms of that, and can't put my personal viewpoints into the whole situation, because then you start to alienate people. And I've got really good friends, like super close friends and family members on both sides. And everybody knows just not to bring it up with me, because I'm not going to engage in the conversation. And at the end of the day, I care about you regardless. I don't really care, because these are people that in general are not inflicting harm on anybody, overtly.
No. Well,
so it's just like, hey man,
Yeah, I mean, if Della, your restaurant, if you said, no gay people allowed, I mean, that's messed up, right?
I'd lose half my business.
Right, including mine. But one of the things that I wanted to get to, because you post, and I just want people to know to find you on Twitter, Instagram, and even Facebook, because you post these great quotes. And one of them is this. One of the things I love about martial arts training is that it not only makes you physically tougher, but also develops unparalleled mental fortitude. I would have tanked last year, 2020, without it for sure! Exclamation point.
Yeah.
So how do you
Straight up.
think your martial arts, even if it seems obvious, let's say my audience generally aren't martial artists,
Yeah.
artists or business owners. Like, how did it, save you?
And I'll say this about jujitsu in particular, because jujitsu is a grappling art, and you're very close. It's the opposite of social distancing. Like we want to close the distance. We want to cough right in your ear. I had this conversation with my instructor who owned Sun Dojo up the street until all this shit went down. And, we do Muay Thai there as well, which is a striking art, similar to Taekwondo. You're standing, you rarely make contact.
Correct. Yes.
Kicks, knees, elbows, punches,
Right.
And there was, and across the board, it's like pretty unanimous. The retention rates and the acceptance of that martial art as like part of your culture is much lower than something like jujitsu. And I was asking him one day, just like, why is that? Why are there like so many people that commit to jujitsu and make it like their lifeline, and it doesn't happen with Muay Thai, where people come in for like 6 months and then they're out, then they're off doing yoga or something else. And he's like, well, think about jujitsu, like the commitment you have to make to each other. You have to embrace, you literally have to like let somebody get on top of you. And so jujitsu teaches you that it just connects the dots in a way that other martial arts don't, where like you're in a really bad spot. You're on the bottom. You're in the worst possible place you can be. But we have solutions for you to work your way out of it. It involves patience. It involves breathing. It involves not giving up. Like there's so many just values that are taught in that action of getting from the bottom to a neutral or a better position that translate into the rest of your life. Again, talking about the intimacy in business, like it teaches you that. It teaches you to just really embrace that. Like there's a lot of people out there that don't like human interaction, or they're at least uncomfortable with it. They're not that good at it. And the world would be better. There would be a lot more empathy if that happened more often. So a practice like jujitsu really like it makes you get rid of all that. Like my wife, for instance, she didn't want to train. I'd been at it for like a year, and she's like, I want nothing to do with that. No. And
yeah, but she didn't know that it was going to be like date night for you guys when you did.
She'd be like, she didn't know that's how you get another baby. Naya, our 2-year-old, that's our little jujitsu baby. No, it started, she would see, we've been in neighborhoods. Yeah, I did. No, I'm no shame. We've been friends with a lot of these people for a long time, but something changed after like a year of training with like a certain group of people, and she would see it. She'd say, what's different? And I'm like, man, it's jujitsu. And so it started to like pique her interest, and like she was close to committing to doing it, and she was finally like, what did she say? I don't want some other guy on top of me. And I was like, that's exactly why you need jujitsu. And she was like, damn. I hate it when you're right. But that's what it takes. You have to really you have to overcome like some major obstacles within your own self to be able to even get through a 60-minute class. And once you do it repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly, I mean, jujitsu is so honest, because you can talk a bunch of smack. You can be like, oh man, I can do this, I can do that. I'm bad. I'll tie you up. Once you slap hands, and the other thing that's great about jujitsu is that you can go full steam and walk away, because you have the tap. Where like if someone clocks you in the face full steam, you might not be walking away, man. You might not be getting off the ground for a little while. But jujitsu, you can train it in a real like street fight like fashion, 100%, and both of you get up and shake hands at the end, and nobody's hurt, because you had the ability to tap before an arm snapped or you went to sleep.
Right. And my understanding, and for those who, I became, I think, an orange belt in Taekwondo, was to really not engage. That was the whole point, is to basically de-escalate. But if you did have to engage, you want it over quick and fast. So you learn, strikes or whatever you call them.
Knockout strikes.
Yeah, knockout strikes, where you just kind of want to get it over with and get out of there, if nothing else.
So Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in particular was developed by like smaller guys who, it was the opposite. It was like, let me survive. This guy's bigger than me. He's stronger than me. He's throwing zingers. He's aggressive. He's mean. He's a bad guy. How can I protect myself long enough that he gets tired, and then I strategically move into a place where my smaller, weaker body has an advantage over part of his body to where he's like, okay, I'm done. You won. I won't mess with you anymore. So that's really the beauty of jiu-jitsu. And again, that translates into life and business, because like, I don't know what I would have done, man. This was way bigger than me. This was so powerful and I had no idea what to do, but I knew if I was patient, I knew if I kept my cool, I focused on just like staying calm and looking for these little escapes and these little resources, that success would go up and I would survive it. Whereas if I panicked and let the weight of the world and the media and everybody else's fears overwhelm me, I was going to tank really soon. And I promise you, if I hadn't gotten those lessons from jiu-jitsu over the last 5 years, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
Right. And also, if people hear in the background, so unless it's your wife or something, somebody's doing dishes or cleaning.
Oh yeah, I'm at the restaurant.
I know, but I mean,
my wife do dishes. That's funny.
No, right. But I mean, you're paying that person. You're in your business. Like you're paying. I don't know if you own the building, but you're paying taxes at the very least.
Taxes, rent, utilities.
Right. And so, and there's somebody doing dishes and working while you're sitting here taking your time. And thank you again very much for doing that.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't think a lot of people, understand that aspect of a business. Obviously a lot of people do, but a lot of musicians, we can be kind of arrogant. We walk in and we're like, we get free drinks and free meal. And like, my set, I'll play my set or two or whatever it is and get the hell out of here. Right. But like, there's so much that goes into it. Yeah. It's impressive, but never mind, unless you have something to say about that.
I do. Cause I've been on both sides of that where I was a full-time musician and, depending on the venue, like we've all played those places where they were like, you get your drink tickets if you meet your 15 person quota and like all that crazy shit. Oh, there's a few doormen and club owners I almost strangled. Good thing I didn't know jiu-jitsu because I might have done it. My ignorance kept me at bay. But and then I had a friend who opened a spot and they were like, we're going to do live music 2 nights a week. And I'm like, no, you're not. And they were like, what are you talking about? And we're going to pay them. They're going to be like an employee. And I'm like, it's not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
And they, and it was funny because I'm having this conversation after being a business owner with another friend who is still just a musician. And he's like, man, that's fucked up. Why would you say that? And I was like, just experience, man. Like, give it 2 weeks. And sure enough, they were down to like DJ iPod in no time. Right. And like, you can have one drink, bro. Cause it does hurt. Unless you're in a situation where, if they are paying your bills, then you take care of them. And we know venues that are like that. I mean, look at how the Tea Lounge used to be, man. I used to love playing at the Tea Lounge because they just took care. I mean, they were so gracious that one time I literally drove into town. It was like after Thanksgiving and we had a show there. And I drove from upstate straight to the gig, like literally went straight to the gig. I hadn't even been home. I hadn't been home in days. And it was the end of the night. Of course, we played a few sets. We'd been drinking and everything, but I realized I didn't have coffee beans at home for the next morning. And I was like, fuck. I was like, can I just buy like a small bag of coffee beans from you? Now, these guys had already given me like a sandwich and a bunch of drinks. And they just gave me like a bag of coffee beans. And they were like, just take it. And I was like, oh my God. And they, they didn't pay you, but they passed the tip jar around. I think they actually used to give a cut of bar sales while you were playing too. I mean, they were like, no, they're closed, so maybe there's there's a connection there.
I don't know. I have a great story about the Tea Lounge which was in Park Slope on Union Street, and the reason that there was music there was Oren. Do you know Oren, the Israeli kid? Well, now he's an Israeli man, but he wanted my band Human Feel to play there, and I was trying to convince the guys, and like, man, that place is bullshit. It's a tip gig. I said, promise me. We're going to do great. And we made $1,800 that night, which may not sound like a lot to many people, but in
New York, that's like thousands.
In a tip jar or hat or whatever it was, we made it's a historic story because it gave Oren a lot of confidence in the Tea Lounge to keep going. And but yeah, I don't know. They just got too nice, maybe. I don't,
That probably was a part of it because at a certain point, my band was 8 people. So like, we were taxing. And I remember the last time we played there, and it wasn't long before they closed. And they were like, so everybody only gets 2 drinks tonight, okay? Like they were like, how many of you are there? And I told them, and they were like, oh shit, I was like, don't worry, I'll tell everybody to be cool. And like I would constantly, it was my band. So again, I would like just give the bartender a credit card and be like, I would just pay for everybody's stuff.
Oh, check you out.
I mean, I knew it. That like something like that, it took money to keep it going, and it took if the band wasn't making that much in cash, I would at least get them sauced, and that would get them coming back for more.
Yeah, and not to end on a dark note, but I have friends who own a venue, and when I was playing there before the pandemic, whenever I was 2018 or something, and I was trying to run a tab for my band like that. I was just going to pay for their drinks. Yeah. And they said, we can't let you do that because musicians have walked out on their tab. And I'm like, that's not very cool. Musicians, pay attention. That is not cool. Yeah. You can't do that. And I ended up just giving them my card. And I said, just keep it open. And whatever my band wants, it's on me. Yeah. And that's not about me. It's about those musicians that made that have to happen because they were like, yeah, I'm not going to pay for my food and beverage, whatever, it is.
Yeah, it's very easy for you, to be like, I'm the victim, and the bad part about that and what I learned from being on both sides is that we're both suffering from higher hands, but not to be divisive, and so I think, all this has sucked, but really there was an oversaturation in restaurants, coffee shops, venues, like all this stuff, it was out of control. Look at what Cornelia Street, Cafe, what happened to them. They were paying $80,000 a month in rent. And there was an article when they were closing about and I'm like, well, why did nobody stop in the management and ownership when it was $40,000 a month and be like, I don't think we can go much farther than this. I don't care how much success you're having. There's a certain point where you just cannot keep going and make sense out of it, So I think there's an opportunity here. There's been a little purge that we can revamp things. And if people come into it, musicians have suffered hard. They hear me complaining, but musicians are they got nothing. Guys are sitting on their couch for 10 months, at least I got to go to work every day. I might not have made a lot of money, but I got to physically go through the motions and feel connected to everything still. It's been really bad. And martial arts and school and gym owners too, it's just there's so many, and the support industries for those industries, the seamstresses for Broadway, it goes down the line. And
it goes all the way down. And I last night I did a pre-interview for a podcast that's coming up next week. And, shit is dark. Yep. And on top of all that, this artist I was speaking to said, even when I can produce, even if somebody wants them to work for $1,000, they said, I can't get out of bed till 2:30 in the afternoon. And then I work on my piece until 5:30. And then I'm like, well, I should probably eat some dinner. And then all of a sudden I'm watching something on Netflix or YouTube. And then I'm in bed. And they're sober and everything. It's not like they're, trashing their life. And I said, It's okay, man. It's okay. There are a lot of people out there experiencing this. Jeremiah, let's conclude with this because it's really annoying, and but I have to ask it because it's the actual question from Tom was, is Gordon Ramsay your role model? I don't know why people care about that guy, but could you just what's your connection to Gordon Ramsay?
Not really. I used a picture of him on an Instagram post recently because I'm working on one of my own side projects, and I've been in this mastermind for it over the last few months. And the big conundrum is, do I name this project after me and make it a personal brand mission, or do I make it a company? Right. That I run, but I am not the identity of it. And so I put this question out on just trying to get general feedback from people on Instagram. I took a picture of Gramercy Tavern and Gordon Ramsay and cropped them together and said, would you rather work for, if you were in the culinary industry, would you rather work for a celebrity chef or for a famous restaurant, to see kind of how people what are people more interested in? That being said, I'm much more of a David Chang kind of guy than Gordon Ramsay.
Me too.
But I don't mind Gordon. First of all, I love when he just calls people out on their shit. He walks in their restaurant, he's like, "This is fucking garbage." I love it. I love that he's really
but so much of that is scripted. I hate to ruin everybody's party,
no,
but I know people who have worked on those shows, And there, so much of it is planned, and it's not like he's actually, they're like, kind of, could you make a bad meal? Could you show us your worst, side?
The media loves the worst shit.
It's good. Well, I think humans in general, I've had that conversation with this guru, Nikki Hamid from New Zealand, and also another guru who's 80, and Peter Roth, who's 78, and a healer. And humans just love focusing on the negative.
Yeah. The mind has a negative bias. It totally
So if
does.
I call this podcast "Fuck You," people are like, "Oh, I think I might want to check that out," but then it's not really in that direction.
If it's a nice name, people are like, "Oh no, don't care."
Right.
But
it's
to their
true
credit, a lot of those chefs, though, because I haven't worked for like Gordon Ramsay or anybody like that, but I've worked for some like pretty high end chefs, and that is how they're like. I mean, I think it's changing now, and I think people like David Chang have played a big part in that. But like coming up, I mean, my first restaurant gig was like 89 or 1990, and man, I've had like metal kitchen utensils thrown at me. I've been threatened. We've gotten in fights. Like, I've had food thrown at me. I mean, just all kinds of crazy things by chefs that just like, that's how it was, man. They were brutal. I haven't been kicked. I saw my buddy get kicked.
In the kitchen?
The chef just kicked the shit out of him. And I was like, what the fuck just happened? Just like, cool. And forget about like, those are the physical things. The verbal abuse, it's like beyond.
When I had that gig as a short order cook at 16, at one point, and the waitress's name was Mimi, and I'm not kidding.
That's
and
beautiful.
I was making the orders wrong because I was a kid, and she finally just threw the fucking plate at me. She missed me. It hit the grill, but she was like, "You're not fucking, you're not making it right." And I was like, "Yo, cool."
So I appreciate that part of like his media is that he doesn't, even if it's scripted, he's like, "Oh, this is like what really happens." And I think I'm not a fan of the 8th place trophy culture. I think people need to be called out on their shit. Like if you're bad, you should be told. You don't have to be said like you're bad, but it has to be said, this ain't good, man. Like you need to step it up, So I appreciate that much, but no, he's not, no direct connection to him. He's entertaining to watch.
I'm a Jamie Oliver fan. I like Chang, but for me, Jamie Oliver is like the sweet, kind, positive guy.
See, that's what I was gonna say. I'm not because he's so nice. He's got that cute little accent. But David Chang is like right up the middle because I've heard he's an asshole to work for. Which seems that's like okay, that's more like what I'm familiar with and used to. But he's done great things for people in restaurants and suppliers. Like he's exposed a lot about the supply chain. He says all the time, like your food should cost more. Like if you're going out for a meal, my basic premise is once you relinquish the control, like you decide to go out, you're no longer in control. You should not complain. You should just be like, okay. Now, granted, there are circumstances where you have to, again, if it's bad, you got to be like, hey, this is bad. But no, like a lot of these businesses and producers and stuff, they're teetering constantly on the brink of extinction. And, it's hard. It's really hard. And so if you get like so much, that's why I hate Yelp because it's it just Yelp feeds off of negative shit. I don't look at it. Like I literally have not looked at Yelp in years. I don't care.
No one has given Della a bad review on Yelp or something.
Oh yeah, no, we've gotten tons.
Really?
Yeah. And I just don't look at it anymore because it's just all negative and it's almost like they just want that attention. If I was getting the same feedback, I look at other platforms. If I was getting it across the board on other platforms, or even on one, just the same thing over and over, like they got this one server, it's just an asshole, then I would address an issue. But most of it is like really, really great. And every now and then someone's like, a bad night.
Right. And the reality is if I've seen Yelp reviews were like $15 for a fucking burger. And I'm like, okay, first of all, somebody had to grow that cow. Somebody had to butcher it. Somebody had to process it. Somebody had to grow the bun, the wheat for the bun. If there's lettuce on there, somebody had to grow that, right? And the ketchup and the mustard and the mayo. Come on, man. How can it not be $15?
$15 is nothing. And something like the price of beef goes up and down so drastically all the time. And
my cousin, the one I was telling you about, is a cattle rancher in Nebraska.
Yeah.
And he knows. And also during the pandemic, they got a notification like, we don't want your cattle this year. Just, either destroy them or do whatever you want. So they offered me a cow. My cousin actually offered me a cow.
Just keep it in the backyard and keep it in the driveway.
No, I know you're joking, but the butcher over here in our neighborhood would have kept it for me. But
oh, cool.
For whatever reason, because of the whole Trump thing, I was just like, keep your cow. But it's just right. But again, whether somebody's vegan, vegetarian, I was vegetarian for 20 some years, and vegan at times. So, but making this food takes a lot of energy. And time.
But like a bottle of wine too, like same thing. It's just like the people that really lose in those situations big time are the producers and the growers. Right. Sometimes like the packagers, and then definitely like the last stop. Like it's like if it's a restaurant, the restaurant is they're just barely getting by. The retailer, because you throw all those other bills on top of that, and the salesman, the creepy salesman, they do okay because they don't. Those guys they're just out on the street slinging it. I mean, it's actually not a bad gig. I could never do it. I think it's creepy, but
not for me either. But
they do okay. They're the ones that are walking with like the good paychecks, and the rest of us are like, damn, why that motherfucker? Why has he got such a nice car? Is what it is. I don't care. I love the position that I'm in, and like for me, like if it's not about people, then I don't want to do it. Like I love being entrenched in the community, and like again, Windsor Terrace, like. It really gave me the opportunity and it made me shine. It like pushed me up. It wasn't the other way around. I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to fix this neighborhood. Like I was like literally just like lost and screwing around, like going on tour from time to time and like kind of being a dad, but still like partying my dick off and just like doing dumb shit and like getting arrested and stuff. And like the opportunity came. And I took it, but like the opportunity presented itself in the form of the community first.
And I find that you just dropped out.
Yeah, someone tried to call me. My kid's trying to call me. I just
let's at the end, I like to ask if people have something. I mean, you've kind of been philosophical and guru-ish this entire time, but is there some kind of statement or something that you would like to say to the world that maybe if I edit out a clip that I could put out there?
Yeah.
Or, is there anything that in that?
Just a couple simple words, man. Push and preserve. Like push yourself, challenge yourself. Don't get soft. The generations are getting softer. Push yourself. Push the people around you, and in the tough times, just like. Do what you have to get through it, like try not to be too much of a dick, but sometimes you have to be, but just like try to get through it. And at the end of the day, like, it's your accomplishments that go on your gravestone, not anybody else's, so you gotta do your thing, man. And not be overly apologetic, cause a lot of people are just going to abandon shit. Don't worry about it. Just like, in a way, get the blinders on and just go full steam ahead.
That's pretty much what I'm doing here, man. Yeah. Podcast. It's great advice. And, when people criticize or have input, like, man, you got to get a different camera or you got to blah, blah, blah. I'm like, dude, I can't believe I even like started this fucking thing. Like, don't give me shit. And now I got to edit all those episodes. And it's
I feel that so much. It's like when you build a restaurant and you like,
it's like, don't use those napkins. Hey,
you
fuck
bring
you.
You bring somebody a plate of food and they're like, fuck. And you're like, do you know what I had to go through just to make this fucking this dish of pasta? Like, Jesus Christ. Like, absolutely, man. Just like, you're an inspiration, man. I love it. I love to see stuff like this. And, it makes me want to, because there are times where I'm tired and I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to do anymore. And I'll see you cranking it out and I'm like, damn, I got to keep going. So
somebody said the other day to me, so when's your last podcast? I was like, what kind of question is that? Like, that's like asking, like, when do you think you're going to die? And I was like, I don't know. But also, I'm barely hanging on here. Like, like getting this new camera and like having this like, wealthy business owner on. I'm like, okay, I got to have my shit together. Hey, and then I'm like nervous about wearing the ghee. Is he going to think it's funny? I'm just saying, folks, we got to stop pushing people down. You know, if you don't have anything nice to say, just let people go about their way. And your kid really needs to talk to you. We'll take that as a sign. Thank you, Master Fox, for being on the show. I love you so much, man.
Thank you. Love you too,
Have
brother.
a beautiful day, and we'll see you in 2021 at some point.
Yeah, man. Keep up all the great work, man. It's really awesome. I can't wait to see all this stuff come out, man. It's fantastic.
Me too, by the way. Me too.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Constant Constance. Tune in every week for new conversations. And if you want even more, check out Andrew's Patreon for more exclusive content and additional conversations. Hosted and produced by Andrew D'Angelo. Edited and mixed by Lucy Little. Original music by Andrew D'Angelo and Maximilian Moore D'Angelo. Intro is Henrietta Weeks. Thanks so much. See you next time.
You fucking rocked it. Like
You killed it.
she doesn't know she says podcast, right? Like she doesn't even know.